In 1670, a Dutch East India Company expedition ventured deep into South African terrain, seeking diamond deposits. They stumbled upon a mountain cave system north of the Cape of Good Hope. Out of 23 individuals who entered the main cave, only 5 made it back. Although official company records attributed the casualties to a rockfall, the personal diaries of the survivors disclosed a vastly different event, an encounter with a creature the local Hotan tribes referred to as Grootslang, the primordial great elephant snake. These accounts were classified, and the survivors, handsomely compensated, were sworn to secrecy. The caves were subsequently declared a restricted zone for 2 centuries. Few Europeans then credited the tales of African tribes regarding colossal serpents dwelling in hidden caves and guarding immense riches. Educated society dismissed these narratives as mere primitive superstitions, born from fear of the unknown or attempts by natives to protect sacred sites from trespassers. Yet those who returned from the 1670 expedition were forever haunted by the memory of snakes, profound darkness, and the decaying stench that pervaded their nightmares. The expedition was initiated by Rik van der Stel, a senior trading agent for the Dutch East India Company at the Cape of Good Hope settlement. Established in 1652 as a port for ships traversing to and from India, the settlement gradually evolved into a flourishing colony. The Dutch cultivated farms, raised livestock, engaged in trade with local tribes, and explored the surrounding regions for minerals. Van der Stel, an ambitious 42-year-old who had spent most of his life in the colonies, understood that Africa's true wealth lay not in spices or furs, but in its mineral resources. Rumors of gold and diamonds had circulated among settlers since the colony's inception. Indigenous tribes occasionally offered uncut stones for trade, lustrous, durable, and clearly valuable, but steadfastly refused to disclose their origins. In early 1670, a trader who had long resided among the Hotans, mastering their language and gaining their trust, approached van der Stel. The merchant recounted that elders from one tribe had mentioned mountain caves where, legend held, untold treasures, diamonds, gold, and precious stones accumulated over centuries were stored. These caves were located a 3-day journey north of the settlement, in an area yet to be fully charted by the Dutch. However, the tribes shunned these locales, branding them cursed and asserting that Grootslang resided there, a creature the size of an elephant, yet with the body of a snake, possessing strength to crush a bull and avarice exceeding any humans. Van der Stel scoffed at monsters, but keenly believed in diamonds. He assembled an expedition comprising 23 men, 10 garrison soldiers armed with muskets and sabers, 5 Hottentot porters hired for their assistance, 3 experienced hunters knowledgeable about African wildlife, 2 cartographers for mapping, and a trader fluent in local languages and familiar with the region. Van der Stel himself joined, accompanied by 2 assistants. Their equipment included 2 weeks' worth of food, water, wineskins, ropes, picks, and shovels for cave exploration, lanterns with candles, gunpowder, lead bullets, and several horses and mules for transport. The expedition commenced on April 23, 1670. The weather was warm and dry. It was late autumn in South Africa, ideal for travel. The initial 2 days proceeded without incident. They trekked across plains covered in hardy grasses and thorny bushes, past sparse acacia trees beneath the intense sun. The Hotan porters remained composed, followed instructions, and did not voice complaints. The hunters secured several antelopes, providing the group with fresh meat. By the 3rd day, they reached the foothills. The terrain became rugged, marked by hills, gorges, and dense vegetation in lower elevations. Night temperatures plummeted significantly, necessitating fires for warmth and predator deterrence. They heard distant lion roars, and once observed a herd of elephants at a watering hole. The hunters advised caution, emphasizing the unpredictability of elephants, particularly mothers with calves. By the evening of the fourth day, they arrived at the mountain range. The rock faces ascended sharply, forming nearly sheer walls hundreds of feet high. The trader pointed toward a rock crevice, partially obscured by thickets. He stated that, according to the Hottons, this was the entrance to a cave system where Grootslang dwelled and treasures lay hidden. Upon hearing the creature's name, the porters grew agitated, conversing amongst themselves in their native tongue. The merchant translated. They declared they would proceed no further, that this was a place of death, and that white people were mad to enter. Vanderstel attempted to persuade them, offering double payment. The porters refused. One elder, via the merchant, explained. Grootslang was an ancient being, created by the gods at the world's dawn when they were still learning to create life. The creature proved too intelligent, too powerful, too covetous. The gods, realizing their error, tried to destroy it, but failed. So they imprisoned it in deep caves, hoping it would remain there eternally. Yet Grootslang lived on, insatiably hungry, still guarding its treasures. Those who entered its domain never returned. Vanderstel scoffed, dismissing it as a fable. He informed the porters that if they left, they would receive no compensation. The porters conferred, gathered their belongings, and retraced their steps. Only the merchant remained, perhaps braver or greedier than the rest. The group was reduced to 18 individuals. On the morning of April 27th, the group approached the cave entrance. The rock crevice measured approximately 10 feet wide and 15 feet high, extending deep into the mountain at an angle, gradually expanding. Within, it was dark. The air emanating from the cave was cold, damp, and carried the faint scent of earth mixed with something else, a sweet, rotten odor, almost imperceptible. The hunters noted the absence of animals around the entrance. Typically, caves provided refuge for leopards, hyenas, bats, and snakes. Here, there was nothing. No tracks, no droppings, no sounds. Only stone, thickets at the entrance, and silence. Vanderstel ordered the lanterns to be lit. The soldiers inspected their muskets, loading gunpowder into the chambers and inserting bullets. The hunters gripped their spears and knives. The merchant carried spare lanterns and candles. The cartographers prepared to sketch, noting turns and measuring distances. They entered the cave cautiously, in single file, holding their lanterns forward. The first 50 feet of the passage were narrow, with walls and ceiling covered in damp moss, slippery stones, and puddles underfoot. Water dripped from above. Footsteps echoed off the walls, creating the illusion of another presence. The temperature dropped. It was 15 degrees Celsius inside, compared to 25 degrees outside, and their breath became visible as mist. The passage then widened into a spacious chamber, roughly the size of a small church. The ceiling was lost in darkness. The walls were adorned with stalactites, and the floor was dotted with stalagmites, through which they carefully navigated. The lanterns illuminated details, the strange shapes of calcite formations, the glistening moisture on the stones, and the black openings of other passages leading further into the depths. One cartographer began sketching, detailing the chamber's dimensions. In a distant corner, a soldier noticed something unusual. He approached, raising his lantern. They discovered bones, the skeleton of a large animal, possibly an antelope or wild horse, partially buried in crumbling sand. The bones were ancient, bleached by time, but some bore distinct marks not left by predators or scavengers. Deep grooves, as if the bone had been crushed by immense force, splitting and shattering it. The hunter examined them, remarking that only an elephant stepping on the carcass or a crocodile in its jaws could inflict such damage. However, elephants do not enter caves, and crocodiles do not inhabit mountains. They pressed onward, traversing several chambers connected by narrow passages. In one chamber, They found a small underground lake, its waters perfectly still and black as pitch, reflecting the lantern light like a mirror. The merchant cautioned them against drinking the water, warning it could be poisoned by minerals. They skirted the lake's edge, keeping close to the walls. In the subsequent chamber, a soldier stumbled, fell, and dropped his lantern. The lantern rolled across the floor and extinguished. In the darkness, a sound reverberated, a dull, resonating thud, as if something massive had shifted deep within the caves. The sound was of such low frequency that it was felt more than heard, a vibration passing through the ground, the stones, and their very bones. Everyone froze. Silence. Then the sound recurred, a little further off, suggesting its source was moving away. Van der Stel ordered a spare lantern lit and instructed everyone to proceed more quietly, avoiding any unnecessary noise. They passed through several more chambers. In one, the walls bore peculiar scratches, deep, parallel grooves running horizontally about 6 feet above the floor. These grooves extended for dozens of feet, as if something large with claws or scales had brushed against the wall in passing. The cartographer attempted to measure the grooves, approximately 3 inches wide each and about an inch deep. What immense force would be required to create such marks in solid stone? The odor intensified. The air became unequivocally sweetish, a putrid blend with hints of musk and ammonia, as though they were nearing a large predator's den or an area of decaying animal remains. The hunters exchanged silent glances. The soldiers tightened their grip on their muskets. Van der Stel commanded them to press onward, convinced that if treasures truly lay ahead, they were close. Around midday, though the depth of the caves made the exact time unknowable, they entered the largest chamber yet. The ceiling vanished into an unlit darkness beyond the reach of their lanterns. The floor was relatively even, blanketed with sand and small stones. The walls receded into the distance, suggesting a vast hall as grand as a cathedral. In the center, partially veiled by dust and sand, sparkling objects appeared. Van der Stel approached, knelt, and picked one up. A heavy, transparent, raw diamond the size of a walnut, reflecting the lantern light in a myriad of sparks. Nearby, various sized stones, emeralds, rubies, topazes, lay scattered as if casually strewn. A bit further, gold jewelry, bracelets, rings, chalices, and ancient patina-covered coins of unknown origin rested. Soldiers and hunters eagerly began collecting the riches, filling their bags. An overwhelming excitement gripped everyone. This was wealth to last generations. Van der Stel exulted, proclaiming the expedition's immense success and the company's promise of generous rewards. Even the cartographers abandoned their sketching to join the collection. Yet the merchant remained apart, holding a lantern, his gaze fixed on the far end of the hall, from where the scent now emanated with almost unbearable intensity. He called to Van der Stel, pointing. Van der Stel raised his lantern and looked. At the chamber's far end was a massive, irregularly shaped pile, draped in something resembling cloth or leather. The heap was enormous, rising 10, maybe 15 feet high and extending 20 to 30 feet long. A hunter approached, illuminating the pile with his lantern, then stopped, his face paling, and recoiled. It was not a pile. It was a body. A colossal, serpentine form coiled into rings, covered in thick, rough, gray-green skin marked with scars and growths. The body slowly rose and fell, breathing deeply and rhythmically like a sleeping beast. Van der Stel froze. Everyone froze. The silence was absolute, punctuated only by the creature's heavy respiration. One soldier began to retreat cautiously, making no sound. The others mimicked his movement. But a young cartographer, barely 23, succumbed to the tension, turned, and bolted for the exit. His boots clattered loudly on the stones, the echoes resonating throughout the hall. The creature's breathing hitched, then ceased, followed by a moment of profound silence. Then came a sound, a low, vibrating roar that shook the stones beneath their feet and dislodged dust from the ceiling. The heap began to move. Its coiled body straightened and ascended, unveiling the creature's true dimensions. Grootslang was monstrous. Its body stretched at least 50 feet, perhaps more, difficult to gauge precisely in the gloom. Its widest point measured over 3 feet thick. Its head, massive and triangular, resembling a snake's but far larger, with formidable jaws and visible rows of teeth even in the dim light, rose approximately 12 feet from the floor. But most terrifying were the bony, curved protrusions growing from its head's sides, like shorter, thicker elephant tusks, each about 2 feet long. The creature's eyes opened, 2 immense yellow orbs with vertical pupils glowing with their own faint light in the darkness. The gaze was intelligent, evaluative, brimming with ancient malice and hunger. Grootslang regarded the humans not as a threat, but as prey. Its mouth opened, producing a sound, a hiss that morphed into a low hum, as if attempting human speech. But its throat and tongue were ill-suited. Words emerged, distorted, barely decipherable, yet understandable. They came slowly, with drawn-out pauses. Go away from here. Mine. All mine. The voice scraped like stone on stone, low and chest vibrating. Some soldiers dropped their muskets, collapsing to their knees, paralyzed by terror. Vanderstel, summoning his last ounce of will, bellowed an order to retreat. The men abandoned their bags of treasure, spun around, and fled toward the exit. Grootslang moved. Its body slid across the floor with incredible speed for its mass, writhing, coiling around stalagmites and crushing them like dry branches. Its tail lashed out, striking a group of soldiers, sweeping 3 of them against the wall. The blow was so tremendous that one soldier lay motionless, his body unnaturally contorted. The group scrambled through chambers and passages, stumbling, falling, losing their lanterns. Behind them, the colossal body slithered over stones. A roar echoed, deafening them. The creature pursued, but its progress slowed in the narrow passages, struggling to squeeze its massive form between the walls. In one chamber, the group splintered. Some fled through the left passage, others through the right. Grootslang chose the left, slid inside, and vanished. Screams and gunshots erupted from the darkness, then silence. Those who chose the right passage continued their desperate run, never looking back. Of the 18 who entered the caves, only 5 emerged. Vanderstel, the merchant, 2 soldiers, and 1 hunter. They burst from the crevice into the brilliant daylight, collapsing onto the ground, gasping for air, trembling. From the cave's darkness behind them came Grootslang's final roar, triumphant, hollow, fading. The creature did not pursue them further, retreating into the depths, to its treasures, to its lair. The survivors lay on the rocks, unable to rise. Some wept. Others stared blankly at the sky, thanking God for their deliverance. Vanderstel sat, arms wrapped around his knees, shaking. His ambition, his greed, had led to the deaths of 13 people. And for what? They had retrieved not a single diamond, abandoning everything in their panic. By evening, they gathered enough strength to begin the journey back to the settlement. They walked without pause for almost 3 days, subsisting on the meager provisions left at the cave entrance. Their horses and mules had either fled or been consumed by predators during their absence. They proceeded on foot, carrying only essential belongings. They reached the settlement on May 3rd. Van der Stel immediately reported the incident to the colony's governor, who ordered a commission. The commission interviewed the survivors, all 5 accounts aligning. A colossal, serpentine creature, with a head blending snake and elephant, dwelling in caves, guarding treasures, and responsible for the deaths of 13 individuals. The governor faced a predicament. Reporting the deaths to Amsterdam meant incurring the company director's wrath and potentially losing his position. However, completely concealing the incident was impossible, as too many people knew of the expedition and too many families awaited the return of their soldiers and hunters. A compromise was struck. The official report stated that the expedition had been caught in a rockfall within the caves, most of the group perishing under the debris, and the survivors barely escaping. No mention was made of Grootslang, the treasures, or an intelligent creature. It was simply deemed a tragic accident. The survivors received generous compensation for the era, but with the money came a document to sign. A pledge never to reveal the truth of what happened in the caves, not to speak of the creature, not to attempt to return. Violation meant arrest, property confiscation, and potentially death for perjury and undermining the company's authority. 4 signed. The merchant refused, declaring he would not be silenced about what he had witnessed. He was arrested that same day, charged with desertion during the expedition, and sentenced to 10 years of hard labor. He died 2 years later while constructing a fort, leaving no records. The caves were declared a restricted zone. The crevice entrance was blocked with stones, and warning signs were erected. Local tribes were strictly forbidden from guiding Europeans to those places. Any mention of Grootslang was suppressed, and those who spread rumors faced punishment. Van der Stel lived another 23 years, continuing his service to the company, but never again leading expeditions into the continent's interior. It was said that until his final days he feared darkness, slept with candles lit, and awoke in a cold sweat from nightmares featuring yellow eyes and a low, vibrating roar. The 2 soldiers who survived the caves left military service at the first opportunity. One returned to Holland, married, opened a tavern in Amsterdam, and never spoke of his past. The other remained in Africa, but moved to the east coast, far from those mountains, becoming a fisherman and living a modest, quiet life. The hunter, the 5th survivor, vanished without a trace a year after his return. Some speculated he had gone back to the caves, unable to forget the treasures he had seen. Others conjectured he met his demise under company orders, a grim measure to ensure his permanent silence. The definitive truth remains elusive. Nevertheless, the lore of Grootslang endured amongst the African communities. The Khoisan, Xhosa, and Zulu all recounted tales of the colossal elephant serpent, a creature said to inhabit deep caverns, safeguarding immense riches and slaying anyone who dared to pilfer them. Most European settlers dismissed these narratives as unsophisticated superstitions. Yet a select few, seasoned by prolonged stays in Africa, recognized the kernel of veracity within every legend. During the 19th century, when South Africa fell under British dominion, several expeditions embarked on quests to locate the very caves detailed in ancient Dutch chronicles. The majority of these ventures yielded no discoveries. The mountain ranges were vast, riddles with numerous caves, and the precise coordinates had been lost to time. However, an expedition in 1868 chanced upon a cave system that precisely matched the historical descriptions. Its entrance was sealed, stones veiled by moss and foliage, yet its location and dimensions aligned perfectly. The expedition commenced efforts to unblock the entrance, but on the inaugural day, a worker was crushed by a plummeting boulder. The following day, 2 more vanished without a trace. They had ventured into a passage and never reappeared. The expedition leader promptly halted operations. His report cited the caves as unstable and perilous for exploration, advocating that they be left undisturbed. Contemporary researchers, equipped with 21st-century advancements, occasionally endeavor to locate the Grootslang caves. They employ satellite imagery, ground-penetrating radar, and drones. They unearth numerous cave systems within South Africa's mountains, some truly colossal and barely explored. Nonetheless, the specific cave detailed in the 1670 records has never been found. Perhaps its entrance was entirely obliterated by landslides, or the coordinates in the old documents are imprecise. Or perhaps the entity still resides there in the gloom, guarding its wealth, biding its time for the next unwary souls bold enough to disrupt its tranquility. Zoologists express skepticism regarding the existence of Grootslang. No known animal aligns with the descriptions. Serpents do not attain 50 feet in length, lack tusks, and do not possess the cognitive capacity for speech. Elephants do not have serpentine bodies and do not inhabit caves. Accounts from survivors are often attributed to collective hallucinations induced by stress, darkness, and terror. The notion of treasures is explained by avarice and a desire to rationalize expedition failures. Cryptozoologists, however, remain undeterred. They emphasize that Africa still harbors myriad unexplored territories, that new species of large animals are regularly discovered, and that cave systems can conceal ecosystems utterly isolated from the external world. They compile testimonies from modern locals who occasionally recount encounters with colossal snakes in the mountains, booming roars emanating from cave depths, and peculiar markings on rocks. The truth, as ever, lies somewhere in the middle. Was Grootslang a legitimate creature? The last survivor of an extinct species that persisted in isolation? Or was it a monstrous amalgamation of dread, shadow, and human imagination that transformed an ordinary python or crocodile into a beast of epic proportions? No one can definitively say. What is irrefutably known is that 13 individuals entered those caves on that day in 1670 and never emerged. The 5 survivors were forever scarred, unable to calmly articulate their experiences for the remainder of their lives. The caves were declared off-limits and remain so in South Africa's collective memory. And the saga of Grootslang, the magnificent elephantine serpent from primordial times, persists, transmitted across generations, a reminder that some riches are not worth the ultimate cost. Perhaps in the recesses of the African mountains, in caves where daylight never penetrates, where perpetual darkness and cold dampness prevail, those very diamonds and gold still repose, glimmering in the gloom, untouched for centuries. And perhaps an ancient being, forged at the dawn of existence, slumbers over them, too sagacious, too potent, too avaricious to share its bounty with anyone. A creature that will awaken once more if someone is imprudent enough to shatter its peace. Africa safeguards a multitude of mysteries. Grootslang is merely one of them, and perhaps it is wiser to leave these secrets undiscovered, interred in the darkness where they rightfully belong. For some knowledge, some treasures, some encounters are simply too costly. And that cost is tallied not in gold and diamonds, but in human lives.